Let's now talk about two advanced features of this pattern tool, and these two features are Very Sketch and Geometry Pattern. Now, I'll start with Very Sketch. So here we have this simple 3D drawing where I have a plate and this slot in it. Now, I just want to create multiple copies of this slot right along this path, but I want this in a particular way. I want this shape to change right along this arc. So if this slot moves right along this one, I just want it to increase in size. Now, to do that, I have created this drawing in a very particular way. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'll just go to this cut extrude, I'll select the sketch, and I'll go to this edit sketch option. And here we have it. So I've got this line here, and that's the edge, and I've created an offset of this here. So that's 7.6, and also I've created an offset of this arc at a distance of 3 units. So now that I have these 3 offsets, I then created this slot right between these 2 offsets in such a way that these are tangent right here. Now, what will happen when I add this tangent? Well, let me show you. So I'll delete this dimension here, 10 unit dimension, and now I'll move it right along this, and you'll notice that it will change its shape as it's moving here. And that's the whole idea behind this kind of pattern. So I just want to create a pattern in such a way that its shape changes right along these 2 offsets. And the main dimension which is controlling this is the 10 unit, which I just now deleted because that's the driving dimension here. So let's just add that again. And this dimension is really very important just for this one. So I'll just type in 10 and we'll get back to this in a moment. So this dimension is going to drive this kind of pattern. So now with that, I'll exit out of this and let's just create that pattern. So I'll go to linear pattern and I'll start with direction 1. Now, as I mentioned previously, that dimension, the 10 unit dimension, is the really driving factor here, and that will be the direction in this case too. For this variable sketch, you simply cannot select a plane or an edge as a direction, because if you select that, the very sketch option, which is right here on the options panel, will not activate. It is deactivated by default and it will remain deactivated as long as you've got a plane or an edge selected. So in order to select the dimension, I'll cancel out of this and I'll select this cut extrude feature so that the dimension is highlighted. Then I'll go to linear pattern, and in direction 1, I'll select dimension. There we are. Now the very sketch option is available and it is checked also. Let's just uncheck it for now. And let's just create the pattern. So we have got this. Let's reverse the direction. We just want it on this direction. So I'll click here. Now gap is 12 unit and number of object is 9. Let's make it 10. Okay, and the gap is 12. I'll leave that gap. Okay, right now we are getting very simple kind of pattern, which is this one. So nothing special here, but as soon as you activate this very sketch, you will get the pattern which you actually need. So it will vary according to the geometry. Now in this case, we have partial preview selected. So I'll select full preview, and now you can see the preview of this pattern. This is what we are going to get. Now in some instances, you may not end up with this kind of preview, and SolidWorks may fail to create this kind of pattern, and that's most likely because of this geometry pattern. So when creating this, make sure geometry pattern is unchecked. We'll talk about this in a moment, but for now, just make sure geometry pattern is not checked, because if it is, SolidWorks may fail to create the pattern. So I'll uncheck this geometry pattern, very sketch is checked, and okay, there we are. We have got this pattern, and that's the very sketch feature. Now let's talk about the geometry pattern. So I'll go to window and select the second drawing. So here we have this geometry pattern drawing where I've got this kind of shape which is made with this spline. So this is a spline, an offset of a spline, and this 3D plane here. And then we have this ellipse which has been extruded only up to this plane. All right, now here I'll use the geometry pattern, and for that, once again, I'll go to linear pattern. Now, for the direction, we just need to select this one. That's the direction, but unfortunately, we don't have a straight line right along this line. So for that, I'll use a plane. So I'll go to feature tree and I'll select the right plane. So the perpendicular of this right plane will be the direction. That's what I want. All right. Now, gap is 10. Number of object is 10. I'll leave these 2 values at the default and I'll go to features and faces. And in feature, I'll select this feature. There we are, we've got this feature now. And now we may need to increase the gap here. So I'll just increase the gap. So it is 20, I'll just make it 12, not 20. So not 12, even maybe 14. And I'll decrease number of objects. So 16, and number of objects 8. Now I guess we can make it 20. Okay, there we are. So we've got 8 objects and the gap is 20 mm. And this is what we are going to get. Now in this case, it is just creating a pattern of this main geometry right along this face. So when creating this feature, this boss extrude feature, we just created it in such a way that it ends right on this plane. And it is just following that same pattern here. Now, if you uncheck this geometry pattern, this is what you're going to get. It will just end right along this plane. So that's because of the design intent. We just created this main feature using this property. Let me just go to this boss space extrude feature and let me just show you what I mean by that. So here I selected up to surface when creating this, and for the surface I selected this one, and that is why it is terminating just on this surface right here. And all the other patterns are also following the same thing. So for every other pattern, it's just terminating on this surface and we are getting this kind of clean shape here. If, however, you just go to this linear pattern and here you select this geometry pattern, then this will create a complete replica, a complete copy of the main pattern. It will ignore that surface which has been used here. So it will just make a complete copy of this main object. So in this case, just to simplify this thing, I'll decrease number of objects from 8 to, I'll just make it maybe 6. And here is the gap. I'll leave that one. And with geometry pattern selected, I'll just click OK. And this is what we are going to get. So every single pattern now is an exact copy of this main pattern. And that's the difference between the geometry pattern option selected and not selected. So when you keep that option selected, you will get all the other patterns which are exact replica of the main object. And if you uncheck that option, it will follow the design intent and it will just make it exactly the way it should. So that's the geometry pattern feature.